Okay, we are live. So, hopefully, technically, somehow in the future, we have a wizard who comes along who can hit the buttons. You know what I mean? Hello, good to have you here.
Did you lose sound last week, or was it me?
Yeah, at the 40-minute mark, I lost sound.
Good. I thought I did something. I moved, and I'm like, what did I do?
No, I had a brilliant move. I forgot to change the batteries on the microphone. Like the most basic mistake you could ever make. So, well, yeah, so I thought we'd start out with a time of prayer. You guys have already been praying for a bit, but I'll just jump in. Just a quick word of prayer. Lord, we thank you so much for your word, dear God, and Lord, just the promise that you give us, Lord, that your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light into our path. And God, I just think about what's implied in that, Lord, that implies that the world is dark, Lord, and that our way through this life can be dark and confusing. But Lord, thank you for the light of your word. And I just pray that you would just reach into our lives and that you would give us ears to hear, Lord, a heart to receive these things and a mind to understand. In your name we pray. Oh, Lord, and I also pray for Warren. Dear God, I pray that you would just reach into his life, Lord, and touch him, and that you would just open his heart, Lord, and that he would come to know you, Jesus. Lord, he's your child, Lord, a child of Abraham, a child of Isaac, Lord, and we just pray, Lord, that you would remember your promise to Abraham, Lord, and that you would look upon Warren, Lord, and just touch his heart, we pray. In your name, amen. All right, so we are jumping in, Ecclesiastes 4, verses 13. As ever, get the ball rolling by talking about where we were. I'll just do as abbreviated a job as I can do in the first few chapters. Oftentimes when I talk about it, like sometimes I'll say Solomon is speaking here, but maybe sometimes I'll say like, Ecclesiastes as if his name is Ecclesiastes, but like obviously not Ecclesiastes, but the author of Ecclesiastes. And so the book starts out with the philosopher, the orator, the one who convenes and gathers, right? And he is speaking in a very raw and honest way. I like the book of Ecclesiastes so much because I like real people. And I think like as like New Yorkers, there's something about someone who's just like looks over at you and just goes like, hey, Evan, you got food in your teeth. Like just the quality of a person who just like tells you it like it is. And so he's not pulling any punches. I actually, one of the things I was laughing about is I was reading just for today and through the week, and I was like, Ecclesiastes has this like really dry, wry sense of humor that reminds me a little bit of Jerry Seinfeld. Like someone who's just willing to point out the absurdities in life, you know what I mean? I know that sounds like a stretch, but I saw it. I was like, there's just this ability to say like, a lot of what we're doing is nonsense. So some people have just accounted, they've reduced this book to like, oh, he's just depressed. But he's not just depressed, he's off the charts, he's brilliant. And he's saying the things that all of us at different points in our life would probably say if we were honest. So I'm just going to speak for a moment as an absolutely disgusting, like I'll just say, crude men could think like, oh, to sleep with as many women as possible results in the greatest life possible. Like that's a thought I'll say on behalf of, of men that could go through someone's mind in terms of like, oh, if you just had all these beautiful women. Well, he was with 1,300 women, and he got to the end of it, and he said, "It's all vanity. It's just all empty." Like you don't see a name of a single person because he didn't really love that we can see here and retain that love to the end. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just giving you one example. So let's talk about racing through his life. He starts out with education, and he says, "I'm going to educate myself as to what is wise and what's foolish." And he requires more learning, it said, than any man who really had come before, any man or any woman. And his learning was such that, leaders from Sheba, like the Queen of Sheba, would come to just like learn from him, and just would marvel at this knowledge that he had. So we all love Leonardo da Vinci, but we have his little books, Leonardo da Vinci's books. But what we have of him is his Proverbs, right? And so he gets to the end of knowledge and he says, you know what? There's just no end to knowledge. You can just keep gathering more and more information. He said that's a certain form of vanity. Next thing he goes on to is like, well, if I can't really find the meaning in life by through knowledge, then I'm going to get it through enjoyment. So I'm just going to give myself over to hedonistic pleasure. And so he decides to get drunk a lot, and he just drinks a lot of wine. He decides to amass like paintings for pleasure. He decides to sleep with 1,300 women who are his wives and his concubines. And he gets to the end of that and he said, it's empty. It's absolutely empty. It's meaningless. I think of all the movie stars who you just can't believe it, because I think of the one movie star, I don't know why it hit me harder than the rest, Heath Ledger, just passing away. I had tears in my eyes. I was like, I'm crying over an actor, like I'm an idiot. But I don't know why. There's just something about him. He was so young. He was in the prime of his life. He had everything going for him. Every girl in the country was in love with him. And they just find him dead in Brooklyn, like in his apartment. It's like, again, that whole idea of like all men lead lives of quiet desperation. Like, it's just, that was a hard one. I can't even figure out why. But it's this whole idea of like he had everything, and yet he must have found it all to be empty, right? The number of times we've seen the people at the pinnacle of our society, and they just find them, just recently, Gene Hackman, his wife, his dog's like, bizarre. Gene Hackman was a great actor, one of my favorites. When I was younger, Kurt Cobain, that was a hard one for me. I wasn't allowed to listen to Nirvana, but I did listen to it a bit. It was just hard. He had it all. He achieved the pinnacle of rock fame, and then he just took his life. So Solomon reaches the end of pleasure, and he says, it's not there. I'm not going to find it there. He's like, oh, I'll find it in accomplishment. So he goes off and he builds pleasure gardens. Look at all these like beautiful gardens and things of that sort, and all the architectural edifices that like would be mind-blowing by contemporary standards. We couldn't pull off what he pulled off then. We couldn't pull it off today in terms of like the precious stones and the size of the stones. And so he builds the temple for Israel, and then he builds his own private palaces, and he builds stables for thousands of horses. Empty. So here he is, he's looking at things empty, 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 and he's like, I've exhausted many of my options. So he goes on to the next thing. That's where we are right now, is he then turns his gaze outward. In the beginning, he's telling us, hey, I experienced this. And now he's turning his gaze outward, and now he's starting to look at different things that just vex him. So as we look at this, it's a man who is asking all the right questions. We could say a man or a woman, because we can enter into this, who's asking all the right questions, but maybe not necessarily arriving at the right answers. Someone who's very limited. And if he had one thing that wasn't going for him in all of his brilliance, the writer of Ecclesiastes had one thing going against him. It was time. He was born before he understood the things that would be revealed, in the Messiah. And so he was looking, again and again, he uses the motif, and I looked under the sun. And I looked under the sun. When he looks under the sun, it's just all vanity. When he looks for a few moments, he says, I know there is a God. He gets hope. And then he crashes again because he looks back under the sun. So he's limited by time. He's limited in that he's largely looking under the sun, but he's honest. So with that, does somebody want to jump into verses? Oh, you know what? Let's quickly fast forward through. I'm going to fast forward through the beginning of Ecclesiastes 4. I'll fast forward through verses 1 through 3. All the oppressions that are done under the sun. We talked last week about the heartache of war. We talked last week about the injustices that we all see on a regular basis, and how literally, for me, I guess I have a sensitive personality. I have to be careful how much I digest, because if I can't do anything about it, it literally will sink me. I get like too down, and I have to like pause and just say, I can't consider all the injustices done under the sun. I just can't. It hurts too much. So he says that. Then verse 4, I saw all the toil and all skill and work that comes from man's envy of his neighbor. Again, so he's turning his gaze outward, and now he's starting to talk about what is it that drives all of us? the thing that drives largely like the world economy isn't just self-sustaining, like arriving in a place where we're good, our basic needs are met. In the 1950s, there were sociologists that were in a full-on panic. Literally, there was remember how we all panicked about Y2K? Like, oh no, the computers are gonna crash. Well, there's a panic in the 1950s, and I read this, that the sociologists identified that we had arrived at all of our basic needs. And so by the 1950s, we could start collapsing as a society because we've never had this in human history before. And they foresaw that actually world hunger could be largely addressed. And they're like, well, what happens when people are idle? What's going to happen when the Americans don't need to work hard because you can just open a can of tuna, you don't need to get it fresh. You could shave and you could throw out your razor when you don't, they were like, clothes are washed easily. So they said we're actually going to collapse as a society. They didn't take one thing into account: greed. They didn't realize, especially as Americans, that we would be insatiable. And it's never enough.
There's also need and wants.
Yeah, there's needs and wants, and very few people can tell the difference, right? I'm going to take a sip of the coffee that I need. I don't want it, I need it. But they didn't foresee what the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying in chapter 4, verse 4. I saw all toil and skill and work that comes from man's envy of his neighbor. Envy drives a lot of society. And I've admitted this before, you guys. I can't get over how I'm really just not into boats that much. I'm not. And I go by neighbors' houses and they always have like these new Boston whalers and stuff. And I'm like, oh, what I would do for that boat. It gets me every time. I'm like, it's such a guy thing. I don't even care about boats, but I want a really nice boat. And when I drive by this one neighbor, I have to check it. I'm like, whoa, I really have greed. It's envy. I can feel it coursing through me. But he's actually laying out what would come to be a contemporary world economy. That greed, keeping up with the Joneses, is what drives a lot of us unhealthily. Now, I'm not saying everyone. Previously, I won't go into it, but he talks about contentment. Actually, no, I'm sorry, it's the next one. Jump over verse 5 to verse 6. There's a handful of quietness and 2 hands full of toil. But the whole idea of a handful of quietness, he says, there is a type out there that has a handful of quietness. Like, they have what they have and they're content with it. And I'll embarrass my friend Dave. He lives right around the corner, but you've never met a more content man in his life. He wakes up in the morning, he goes off, he's a nurse practitioner, he helps people in a cardiac clinic. He really is a lifesaver. He goes back home, he sits with his wife and kids. He doesn't have much in way of possessions, but what he has, he takes great care of it. He's just a content man. Everyone loves this about him. He's never reaching beyond his station. So that's my buddy Dave. Better is a handful of quietness. Then what we see right here, we'll jump back to verse 5. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. What he's saying there is, okay, if society is driven by greed, then fast forward, society also, the society that's driven by just compulsive advancement and acquisition of materials will actually, ironically, produce the burnout. And so I've in my own life, I know people who have burnt out. They just checked out of society. They moved abroad. One individual said something that broke my heart. I'll never forget it. And he said, I was always told when I was growing up in Christian school that sin would last only for a season. And he goes, little did the pastors know that I would travel around the world chasing that season forever. And a horror went down my spine. Just like this whole idea of I'm going to burn out. I'm just going to pursue pleasure. That's it. The burnout happened in the United States, right? 1960s. Hey, listen, if we're going to go kill each other all with nuclear war, if we're just going to do this arms race to the nth degree between the Kremlin and DC, well, we're just going to check out. We're going to do lots of drugs and forget all of you people. So it's the irony, it's the flip side of the society that's insatiable with greed, right? Again, I saw vanity under the sun. One person has no other son or brother, yet there's no end to all his toil. The whole thing about advancing There's a healthy advancement that we just addressed with contentment, but it's rare. The advancement in the greed, the envy that drives us, eventually turns into addiction. And we've all heard the quote before, when Rockefeller was asked how much money is enough, and he said, just $1 more. I sat with a woman once, and with tears in her eyes, they were very wealthy, and she said, my husband, we have enough money to do anything forever. We can go buy grand estates all over the place. We have enough money. And I said to my husband, please, please slow down. I just want to see you. And she said her husband was just like, I can't stop. I just can't stop. And she said he has an addiction. And it just like blew my mind. Like money can actually turn into like a drug, like a real addiction. We'll fast forward through 2 is better than 1. That's that whole beautiful picture of the idea of community. He gives us dark things and he gives us beautiful things. Community and people coming together can do a whole lot more. And then Chris had the excellent observation that even if one person is alone, when they're working together with God, they become 2. So 2 are better than 1. Now we're up to Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 13. Does someone want to read verse 13 through verse 16?
I'll read it. Okay, cool. Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer knows how to heed a warning. The youth may have come from prison to the kingship, where he may have been born in poverty within his kingdom. I saw that all who lived and walked under the sun followed the youth, the king's successor. There was no end to all the people who were before them, but those who came later were not pleased with the successor. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. That was it, right?
Yeah. So jump in if anyone sees anything there.
Well, it's better was. I don't really know what to make of that, but I find it interesting that it's
Yeah, the tense.
the tense. That better was a poor. Yeah, I guess he's looking back on everything, so it does make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
NIV, they have better a poor but wise youth, so in here it's like better to be a
Yeah.
wise youth.
Yeah, so it's fascinating the tense that you both brought up, because what he's painting a picture of is the common story, actually, with a rise to power. So you have someone like, I'm amazed by Bill Clinton's story. I think it's incredible. I mean, Arkansas, can you think of a less likely place to rise to power from? And then becoming like, I forget the name of the award that he had, but he was a Rhodes Scholar and then president. Like Abraham Lincoln, a cabin, like in the woods of Kentucky. But there's actually this pattern, it's not all the time, but this pattern where there's a poor and wise youth. And that poor and wise youth actually has something. Like they actually have something that the old and foolish king doesn't have. Now, I'm not saying Abraham Lincoln was a fool. I'm just saying these stories of rising through the social strata are actually painful, because once they get to the top and they achieve everything that they wanted to achieve, well, then what sets in? It says it right here, who no longer knew how to take advice. So what is the writer of Ecclesiastes saying here? With power comes arrogance. You get to the top and you think who you are. I used to sit on a board, and the head of the board had a common refrain that he would say to all of us when he would I'll try to wrap this in a very diplomatic way. When he would tell us strongly what to do. And he would say, I didn't get to where I am today, but, and it was this pride of just like, I rose through the ranks and you're not going to tell me what to do. And it would oftentimes, it was a little bit horrifying, because it was like, wow, you really think that you're hot stuff, don't you? Like, you really think that you put you on the throne type thing. And this is literally what he's saying. Better it is to be a poor and wise youth, better was a poor and wise youth, than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. He's making an observation that applies to United States right now. I'm not going to go into specific political leaders' names. Just take the past, 5 top leaders. Go through houses of government. I don't like going to contemporary politics. My point is this: how many times does someone take the reins of power, and then they just close off, and they're like, "I have a path that I'm on here. Like, I don't need to listen to you. I just don't need to listen to you." And what does that naturally engender in the population, in the citizenry? We get angry. We get really angry because we're like, we elected you to, have this position in Congress or this and that, and you're not even listening anymore. And then they go, no, and I don't really have to. It's a pattern that oftentimes, it's the case more often than not, right? So he's saying, no longer knew how to take advice, for he went from prison to the throne, again, talking about strata, though in his own kingdom he had been born poor. You'd think he'd remember and walk in humility. I'm, again, not going to talk about specifics, but like one of our leaders went from very, very poor, absolute poverty, and then when he got to the top, just the abuses that are coming out, like recent years, like, oh my goodness, this happened in our own like government. Like we look on with horror, like, and documents are hid and all different things. And we're going to be getting into how Solomon points out cover-ups. He's actually going to go through in a little bit conspiracies and how everyone covers for the other person. But we'll continue with this passage. I saw all the living who move about under the song, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. So what's happening? In Hebrew it says the second youth. That youth is the second youth. This is fascinating. Every single time you get to power, there's some little up-and-coming little twit who comes in and wants to bump you from your place. It's like, so the second you get into power, everyone who you think is your friend is trying to eat you alive. Like, maybe not everyone, but there's someone, and they're coming for your spot. And he's literally saying this, like, what's the point? Because when you get to that place, you don't know who your friends are anymore. And that's an interesting thing that I've found in my life. Is in my art career, I've been able to know some people who are of influence. And one guy said to me, he had a huge, I'll say, he had an empire in the world of TV broadcasting, and he was an agent for a massive author, like one of the top authors in the world. He was his agent. And we were walking along, and he goes, "Kevin, you know why I like hanging out with you?" He's like, "You're never trying to bump me from my place. You're never trying to like wiggle your way in or something like that." He's like, I can't even go anywhere without people just like really trying to take me out, like trying to like find a reason why I shouldn't hold all the real estate I have. And as we said that, somebody walked by the two of us. We were walking in Chelsea, in the city, and a guy looked up and he gave the worst snarl at the guy the friend of mine. He gave such a snarl, and he goes, "And he's one of them." It was this moment. So you get to the top, and then you're paranoid, right? You're absolutely paranoid. There was no end of all the people of whom he led. So sometimes you've worked so hard, you've poured yourself out on behalf of people, and they don't even remember your name, and time goes by. And we think of leaders that have just like absolutely emptied themselves, and then society just moves on to the new flashiest thing. So let's say it was a good leader. Still, this applies. You know what I mean? They just move on. And he's saying it's all vain. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this is also vanity and striving after wind. And I thought I'd pull up this. This is Bernard Partridge, the artist, and I really love this drawing. And this is from King Lear, Shakespeare's King Lear. Who alone suffers most in the mind, leaving free things and happy shows behind? But then the mind much sufferance doth overskip, when grief hath mates and bearing fellowship. So a little bit he's saying like, misery likes company. But the first part, I was reminded, I should have pulled up the image. Have you ever seen the image of JFK standing at the White House desk and his arms are like, his shoulders are hunched over? It's one of the saddest photos. Have you ever seen that?
Looking out the window.
Yeah, he's like looking out the window. And I don't care if it's posed, because like he's JFK, he knew how to use the media. I don't care. It just says, and then the caption below it in the magazine said, the loneliest spot on earth. They're right. That's what Shakespeare is saying. Who alone suffers most in the mind, leaving free things and happy shows behind. It's just, again, it's not a direct correlation, but the whole idea of suffering alone. And this is what Solomon is saying. And he's saying, what use is it? So let's jump over for a moment. I thought it would be cool. Let me find, I have a really beautiful, you know what, I'm gonna hold off on that. We'll jump forward with the text as we have it in chapter 5. Does someone want to read chapter 5, verses 1 through 3?
I got it.
Cool.
Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. A dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a fool.
Yeah, why don't you read, if you don't mind, all the way through to verse 7.
When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not protest to the temple messenger. My vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God.
So if anyone sees anything, jump in.
I guess God doesn't like a BS artist. Is that
Pretty much. Pretty
Sum
much.
that up.
That sums it up nicely.
That's what I'm at.
Our words are very important. I mean, God keeps his word and he expects people to keep the word. It's like, contracts used to be just words and a handshake.
Yeah.
And your word was good as gold and you could trust people today. We were raised too, a long time ago, where, you keep your word, even to your own hurt.
Yeah.
In Psalm 15, I was ministering, you keep your word, even it's to your own hurt.
Yeah.
So now you can't do it anymore. You make sure you fulfill and keep your word.
Yep.
I would always tell my husband, work always seemed to interfere, and we make plans with the kids. I said, Richard, you can't do that. No matter what, you promised. We
Yeah.
have to. We can't, keep breaking promises.
Yeah.
So it's very important. Yeah.
So important. I was in Venice years ago with Margaret, and we went to this little, it's the piazza is called San Marco, I think, and it's the one with like the thousands of pigeons. And we went into this little tiny like wine bar on the side, and we were just getting dinner, and it was so cool. And the owner was there, and there was like waiters, and we just started talking to them, and they said, "Do you know the story of how this place started?" And it looked like when you walked in there, it almost seemed like you would walk in and see like, I don't know, John Steinbeck sitting there. It was just that awesome kind of like post-World War I, World War II era, and they preserved it. And they're like, "Do you know how this started?" I was like, "No, I have no clue." They're like, "Well, the guy sits down. He's like, I'll tell you a story. There's an Italian man who was very poor, and if I'm butchering the story, forgive me, but there were two men. The one I think was English, and he had a bit more, money. And so the Italian man was like serving tables, and then he said the Englishman was heading out, and he said, "As I go, to leave, you work so hard. Why don't you start your own place?" And the guy was like, "I would love to." And they just shook hands on it. And he said, "I will pay you back all of your money for helping me start my own bar." So Harry's Bar. And so fast forward through time, the Englishman came back, and every last bill was put on the table, and he paid. But just that whole idea that it was a handshake between two men, a handshake between two individuals, and their word was their contract. And they told me this story in Italy. It was so beautiful to me. And the whole idea of let your words be few, and when you say them, let them count. I just love that. And if you look at the broad picture of what's happened here, again, so as we read scripture, we zoom in close, we can chew on it, but now let's zoom out. He was exhausted. Education was vain, pleasure was vain, right? Achievements were vain. He's going through all the things that were vain that he's seen, like power and all these different. And then he's in Jerusalem. He can look over here and see where the legit king of Israel would be, let's say, presiding with power. And he says, as we see in this passage here, that whole political show is just absolutely, it's a drama scene, and that's vain. Now, in Jerusalem, he looks over at the temple, and he looks at religion. And he says, you know what else is vain? Religion. It's just empty. I see a bunch of hypocrites walking into a church building. They all have the external trappings. You see right here, they all have the external trappings. They all say the words that they need to say. They have the creeds, they have whatever it might be, the mantras. They look religious, but it's just sounds coming out of their mouth. And God doesn't care for that. And I read this and I think to myself, I'm like, God, I've said plenty of things to you in my life that I was like, if you can just get me through this, then I promise this. And if you can and then it fades away. And how many times is someone I've heard from soldiers who are on the battlefield, if I can just get home to my wife and kids, I promise you I'll devote my life to you. It's horrible, but I'm inclined to do this. It's a religious thing inside of us where we're hasty with our words. And he's saying, this is a sketch from Dante's, it's Gustave Doré, and this is Dante's Inferno. And it's so cool. And so this is the level of hell where hypocrites are. And they all have golden garbs on, golden, whatever you call them, frocks, but they're weighed down with lead. So they have to walk around for all eternity, hunched over, weighed down by the external things that they did that actually, on the other side of eternity, weigh them down. And I just think that's such a powerful image. I mean, that moves me. So what he's saying here is, God doesn't care about fundraisers and, we're going to raise money for this in the church, and the steeple's damaged, and so we need to, and then someone will step forward and be like, oh, I'll write the check, that external show, or people standing up, and I'm not opposed to high clergy and robes and stuff like that. I'm not opposed to it. But Jesus said, the Pharisees, you love long, billowy robes. You love the places of honor, in the markets and the festivals and this prestigious seats. And he goes, you love the external trappings. And the author is saying here, when you go to church, you're there to hear from God. You're there to worship him as well. But I heard a story once. I didn't know this person. I heard it from a pastor, from David Pawson. And he said how there was a man who came to his church, and every Sunday, the husband, the wife, and the children would be there. And the man would stand there, and everyone was singing the hymns. And he was just a stone, nothing out of his mouth. And finally, Pastor David Pawson, he goes to him, he says, Reggie, every Sunday now for a long time, your whole family's singing, and you're the only one with your lips sealed. And he goes, I can't sing it because I don't mean it. And David Pawson, the pastor, was like, fantastic. If we would all walk with that sense of humility. I've heard it said before that Christians don't tell lies, they sing them. And it's I'm guilty. So you have, so Reggie, this man, David Pawson, looks out on the congregation, and one day there he is, and he is singing with all of his heart. And then shortly afterwards, this man gave up a nice job in London. He bought a larger home. He moved his family into the home, and he moved I forget how many, I think it was 20 elderly just English, elderly people, citizens in England. He moved them into this home, and he cared for 20 elderly people up until their end, and he just would rotate that, because he finally said, "Take my silver and my gold, not a mite would I withhold." And when he sang it, he was just like, he meant it. Just like, I love that story. It's so beautiful.
Just you don't mind it.
Yeah, I love it.
Do not let your mouth lead you into sin. It's just like you see what people say to get what they want.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
It's like whether it be greed,
Yep.
gluttony. It's just they know it's not the truth. They know it's not the right thing, but they're just getting to their end game.
They're just
I
getting.
think that's what it's like.
Yeah.
Whether it be anything from small to big, but it's just like there's an angle of what you're saying, and you're saying it to get to whatever, greed, power.
Yeah.
That's it. I find that line pretty strong.
Absolutely. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, verse 6 of chapter 5. And do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. But the first half of that, let not your mouth lead you into sin. I agree with you so much. And I mean, I'll just be really vulnerable with you guys and let you know. Yesterday, I had like kind of a Peter moment. Peter was talking to Jesus, and Jesus says, who do men say that I am? And he says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. It's like just a great moment. Like finally the knucklehead disciples, these fishermen, tax collectors, they got it. It's like, and he's like, and then the next thing out of Jesus' mouth is regarding his death. And Peter goes, no, you don't have to die. You don't have to go and die. And Jesus, one sentence later, says, get thee behind me, Satan. And so it's a great picture of how we can speak words of life to each other, and we can speak words of death to each other. So yesterday morning, I had coffee with someone, and someone who holds a pretty important position, I'll just say, and they were kind of like, I don't know, we just need to talk. I shared a little bit of my story. It was really beautiful. This individual has gone through a lot in life, like a very painful story, but there was a fight. I'll just say this. I was able to speak, I think, what I believe were words of life. And then afterwards, just following up with like, I can't believe how much that helped me, navigate these different things. And I had this peace in my heart, like, wow, I like really it's so cool to be used by God that way. Then I taught a live stream, and some young kids were just being rowdy and they were ruining it for everyone. So I got on the phone with Margaret and I spoke words of death. I wasn't nice. I was annoyed at these several boys who were ruining it for like dozens of other kids. And no matter how many times I asked them to stop, they wouldn't. And so I was angry. And I went home to Margaret and I was like, I really, really spoke words of death. I was annoyed at those kids. She was like, yeah, there's power in the tongue. She's like, you shouldn't have talked that way. She's like, but I forgive you. I was like, thank you. I'm sorry. But in one day, power of life, power of death in the tongue. I'm guilty. And I just went to bed last night just like, wow, like it is better, where is it, verse 6, let not your mouth lead you into sin. So, let's jump forward and let's go into, I thought it'd be cool to pause for a moment, because if we continue with Ecclesiastes, we're looking at someone who, again, looked under the sun. And as they looked under the sun, they were building up, we'll just call it their own kingdom. Maybe it's not fair for me to say that, but like, everything we're looking at here is a very practical earthly view. But there's this beautiful passage that was written by a pastor in the 60s. And think of the prayer that Jesus said, that we should pray. It starts out, obviously, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, holy is your name. And then this is just such a beautiful, like 1-2, it goes, your kingdom come, your will be done. So up until now, there's almost been a lot of like, our kingdom here on this earth, our will be done. But let's pause and look at the life of Jesus. It's such a beautiful passage. Here is a man who was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another obscure village where he worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. And then for 3 years, he was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never owned a home. He never had a family. He never went to college. He never put his foot inside a big city. He never traveled 200 miles from the place where he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompany greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He had nothing to do with this world except the naked power of his divine manhood. While still a young man, the tide of public opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves. His executioners gambled for the only piece of property he had on earth while he was dying, and that was his coat. When he was dead, he was taken down and laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 19 wide centuries have come and gone, and today he is the centerpiece of the human race and the leader of the column of progress. I love that phrase, the column of progress. I am far within the mark when I say that all the armies that ever marched, and all the navies that were ever built, and all the parliaments that ever sat, all the kings that ever reigned, put together, have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as has that one solitary life. It's just, when I read Ecclesiastes, it's almost like I need someone to like pick my head up from underwood, like, you just need to breathe. Because it can weigh you down as you read this. And to pair that against what we're reading right now, the only person who truly said, as he walked this earth, your kingdom come, God, your will be done. So let's jump forward. Does someone want to read verses 8 through 9?
I'll read it. The vanity of wealth and honor. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields.
If anyone sees anything, jump in there. So I'll jump in and say, I don't need to rewind through all of it again. We're on to another thing that he's beholding. He looked at the political power, vanity. He looked at the religious end of things, and he saw people rashly making statements before God. Now he's back at the political power, and he's detailing how, as things do go south and as things like start to unravel, how the people who are perpetrating like bad things, they all cover for each other. I mean, the moment that we're in right now to be reading this. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and of righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. I think we all need to stop being amazed at that matter. It's horrible. It's something that we want to, in the capacity that God has given us within our own spheres of influence, which we don't really even know our sphere of influence, but we pray that every day. We just want to serve God where we are, when we are, right? But spending less time lamenting over, like, let's say like the injustices in the sense of being amazed at it. But he's almost like preparing you, and he's saying like, yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I've painted portraits of politicians. I know one politician, he's a really great man. Integrity, like through and through. I know him really well. I know a lot of his political friends, and then I've actually been on the other side of the political aisle, and his political, like quote unquote, enemies say the highest thing about him. But man, is he rare. And I got involved, I was asked to participate in a major project and try to make this as anonymous as I can. As I was working on this project, the thing that like upset me so much was we're in this very poor neighborhood, and then the politician comes over and starts making fun of all the poor people that were around us. They were out of earshot. We were from here to that wall, and he was making jokes about poor people. It was one of the most terrible things. And I looked over at him and was like, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm not part of this. And he looks over and goes, Kevin, do you know why we're here? Do you know why you're here? Why we asked you to come? It was almost like he was like, in a way, he was like mocking me, but he was inviting me into his club. I was like, well, I'm here to help you with this art project. Like, we're doing some. And he goes, we've gotten really bad press lately, and we saw that you got big articles in Newsday, and we need to undo some of that negative press. So we're wondering if you could put in a kind word with this one author from this newspaper, this journalist. I was like, oh my goodness. And I was amazed, the audacity of this wicked guy. Just recently, I met someone who knows that politician, and he's like, yeah, he's bad. He's a bad guy. That guy was on my cell phone. I had his number, he had my number. I walked away from that project and I blocked him. I was like, I don't ever want to hear from this guy. Like, are you allowed to say the word dirtbag in a Bible study? Like, and it's just like, I've encountered this in the political world so much, but the thing I've learned as I've gone along is I'm not really amazed by it anymore. It says right here, if you see the oppression of poor, the violation of justice, don't be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and it's this trickle down, or you could even say it, I don't know, like mold, it like spreads up. Like, how would you describe it? For the high official is watched by a higher, and yet there are higher ones over them. It's to be expected, right? And this is why Ecclesiastes is a hard book for people. It's like, oh. The next verse is a little bit uncertain. It even says the translation is a little tricky, but this is gain for land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. So maybe what he's saying right here is, if one stays out of the drama and one keeps a mind on what, the task is at hand, then this is gain for a land. So someone who's in a position of power, if they just devote themselves to the task at hand and don't try to wield their power in a tyrannical way, right? Does someone want to read chapter 5, verses 10 through 12?
He who he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is also vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? The sleep of was that it? 11?
Yeah, you can keep going through 12, yeah.
The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to jump in there.
The truth is that the lust of the eye and the pride of life, those things never fulfill.
Yeah.
Just keeps on going. And that's why they say sometimes like the satisfaction and the joy is in the journey. You know, and when you get there, it's done. It's like the balloon is popped. Okay, here we are.
Yeah, the horror of arriving. Yeah.
I mean, I've never felt the horror, but I understand that. That's what they say. So.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. You always want more.
Yeah.
It's like those two times, like, just even before though, what we read, it's like, the other is almost like a clique, where you're getting into this club, and people, you want to please the higher, and then the higher up, that you get into this thing where you're not going to speak the truth anymore.
Yeah.
You just want to keep your
You want to keep your position.
and you want to keep your thing.
Yep, that's it.
And you that goes back in the beginning, you're talking about a lack of empathy. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That you become someone else from that, and you just don't have any, everything is just self.
Yeah.
How am I going to feed myself?
How am I going to preserve this
And it's weird, 'cause
thing?
and that's what I was surprised. Like, I had friends too, like, both coming from poor households or whatever. And, you become somewhat successful, but, like, you want to put yourself into another class and you don't remember or want to help where you came from. It's a weird thing. It's almost like you push it away.
Yeah.
Like, instead, there are some people that put money, computers into school, so they help out. Where
Sure,
they came
there are
from.
some.
But there are a lot that just want to like, oh no, that wasn't me. No,
Yeah.
no, that, like I said, I don't know. It's a,
No, that's well said. I think of, I'll say the guy's name because it's so wonderful, but there's a businessman who was in this area. His name was Todd. His name is Todd. Todd built a massive demolition company. The company did very well. It was intergenerational, and he built it more than anybody. And his whole entire life, he was involved in the church. He was up at Smithtown Gospel Tabernacle. And his whole entire life, as he made his money, he gave, and he gave, and he gave. And every which way he turned, he gave. A bunch of his employees, he caught them. There was some bad stuff that went on. They turned with some totally rogue lawsuit. And he was just like, well, like, okay. And he took a massive, massive hit. And he was just like, all right, whatever. And he just keeps building. And every which way this guy turns, he's pouring out into lives. And I know this because this is my father's really good friend. And I've also heard it from so many people who overlap him. So Todd retires. And usually when someone makes that much money and they go to retire, they start to fall apart because they're like, well, what am I doing? What am I doing? And my dad told me the other day, he's like, he's the happiest retired guy you've ever seen. He's just so content. And the thing is, this is the difference between Todd and someone else who has as much money as Todd. Todd doesn't love money. How does this open right here? He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. There are people, and I think the Christian church should really keep this in mind, there are people who are just innately gifted at making money. The way that I can get up and I can paint, other person can, like John can get up and speak. There are people who are just gifted at making money, but they don't necessarily love it, right? And that's why the Bible says, it doesn't say money is the root of all evil. That's the common misunderstanding, right? It's the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil. So it says, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money. It can never fill the void. But let's for a moment jump over. I love this painting by Rembrandt. This is the rich money changer. Let's jump over to Luke chapter 16. If you'll turn there with me. You got there first. Yeah, I think it's verse 1. So I'll read this out loud. He, Jesus, also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and the charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. And the manager said to himself, what am I going to do? What shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I'm removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said, 100 measures of oil. He said to him, quick, take your bill, sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said, take your bill and write 80. The master then commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. I mean, people, when they say, like, Jesus was so nice, Jesus was, like, you hear, like, all the time on social media, like, Jesus was just love, and it's just like, try cracking that story if you think that like, Jesus will forever keep you surprised. Is he commending someone for literally distorting like bookkeeping and this and that? Like, is it what is being said in this passage? And I'll just jump in and say, what Jesus is saying is the whole idea of mammon, like money, like material possessions here, is listen, whatever bill that has crossed your hands, things in the economy, like if you trace things as they go like far into like origin of like the sweater that I'm wearing, like there's a lot of corruption in this world. But this money has crossed into Kevin's hands now. And now what are you going to do with this earthly ledger book? What are you going to do with it? And Jesus is saying, use it while you have it to help those who are in need. Because as I, Kevin, have my money and I'm like, oh, I see this person who's in need and I can move it over here and I can move it over there. The manager is up in heaven saying, hey, you're using that corrupt bill on earth to secure good things for yourself. Do you think that God sees, like this? I'll just be very honest. There are people in this church who are extraordinarily generous. They've been generous to me. They let me use a painting studio. They've been generous all around, and they don't let their left hand know what their right hand is doing. And God looks down from heaven. He says, you're using corrupt money for godly purposes. I mean, it's just, I love this parable. It's so beautiful.
So I don't quite get what he's doing. Is he saying, so like, he has the bookkeeping of how much everyone owes his master, and then he says like, you owe like $10. He's like, oh, you owe $2.
Yeah.
So, and then the master rewards him?
Yeah, the master's like, well done. Wow, you took care of yourself. And so what God is saying is like, while you have money on this earth, use it in any way you can to secure good things for yourself in eternity. And so what does that mean? Like, it literally means, like, you can be shrewd, literally, in how you're dealing with other people. Like, I'll give you just, like, an example. I'll use Papa, your grandfather, my dad. At any possible juncture that my dad could through his life, I saw my dad being really generous to people. And so he worked on construction sites, and the illegal immigrants came in like a wave. A lot of them were Mexican. And my father bid on a huge construction job in Spackling in the town of Connecticut. He bid $5,000, which is exactly what that job cost. My dad was describing to me how he bid $5,000, and then a crew of Mexicans came in and they bid on the same job. Guess how much? It's gonna hurt. 1,000. They underbid my dad by 4/5. So my father is telling this story as we're driving out to Montauk, and it's early in the morning. When you drive to Montauk, man, you're in the car at 4 a.m. And so we're there as the sun is rising. It's cold. There's this final stretch before Montauk where there's nothing. Do you know the stretch I'm talking about? And as we're driving along, my dad is like, he's never said anything bad about illegal immigrants. Never. He never said anything hateful about Hispanic people, ever. But he was just like, I don't know how to run a business. These people are underbidding me by 4/5. Like, I can't run a business this way. And we look out, and there is an illegal immigrant walking along this long stretch. I mean, that guy had an hour and a half of walking in front of him, and it was cold. And my dad's in his F-350 truck, and he slows the truck down. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? And he's like, Kevin, look at this guy. And he pulls over and unrolls the window. He goes, hey, where are you going? And the guy didn't speak barely anything. He goes, oh yeah. He's like, over there. My dad's like, come on, get in. And the guy looks, because like there's tension between the white construction workers and the Hispanic guys. He goes, get in. And the guy's like, no. He's like, come on, get in. The guy gets in the back of this big F-350 truck, and we're driving. He's like, Kevin, you speak Spanish? He's like, go talk to him. So I start talking to him. We start talking about where he's from. We get, a few minutes later, it was probably like 15 minutes later, we get to the spot. And he goes, we're going to go right here. My dad goes, just 1 minute. He goes, ask him if he's had breakfast. I was like, have you had breakfast? I say in Spanish. And he's like, no. My dad goes, okay, come with me to the deli. My dad goes into the deli. He's like, have him order. So the guy like orders this big breakfast. He's like, get him a coffee as well. Get him a muffin as well. And my dad just gives this guy all his food, and the guy's like, oh, senor. And my dad used mammon to secure for himself things on the other side of eternity. He said goodbye to that guy, just like puts his hand on him. He's like, have a great day. And we went off to the job site. I was like, Dad, you just told me you're losing your business to these illegal immigrants. He's like, well, us Irish, we probably bumped someone out of the way ourselves. He's like, who am I to just, cry over that? Fast forward through all the years, my dad has 2 young Hispanic men who work for him, and they consider my father to be like a dad to them. He has built their entire worlds. They have kids, they have wives and children. They adore my father. And the one guy's name is Tigger, the other is Camilo, and they love my dad as if he is their father. He hangs out at their house all the time. It's this whole idea of use your mammon to secure for yourself things for eternity. God wants, he's in the business of redeeming, right? He can redeem like the American dollar bill any way that he wants to. But we're at the end of time. I see that I didn't get to the end of the passage, but we'll...
You said use your what? What was the word?
Oh, mammon. It's the Jewish word for, it's money, but it's like, I don't know the full connotation. I actually have to admit, I don't know the full connotation, but it always seems to have this like, almost like, it's not sinful, but it's like a dirty, it's of this earth. You know what I mean? So mammon is oftentimes, as I read it, but I'll research that word better. All right, so we'll pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for the truth, Lord, that you just shine into our lives. And I just pray that you'd help us to go out and to live these truths, Lord, and to shine a light for you everywhere that we go. In your name we pray, amen. I'm gonna go hit the button, I'll be back. Hopefully the audio worked this time.